San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Tesla's last-minute delivery drive pays off. The company posts a surge in electric car rollouts for the third quarter. Will it be enough to drive the company to profit, as Elon Musk has promised? Plus, Amazon fights criticism over worker conditions with a pay raise for staff in the U.S. and the U.K. We look at what's behind Jeff Bezos' move to bump the company's minimum wage. And Amazon is also looking to reduce energy bills as it continues its push into our homes. We will speak to the CEO of the smart doorbell company Ring, which Amazon bought for $1 billion, on the part it will play. But first, to our top story. Tesla reported its first delivery numbers since it settled its case with the SEC, and production surged in its third quarter. The company rolled out more than 83,000 vehicles. That is double the number it made last quarter. And 55,000 of the cars were the infamous Model 3. Will this be a turn for the better for Tesla? And CEO Elon Musk, who has agreed to step down as chair of the company and forked over $20 million to the SEC. To discuss, I want to bring in Kathy Zoy in New York. She is the CEO of EVgo, which provides more than 1,000 public charging stations for electric vehicles across 34 states. And here with me in the studio, Bloomberg's Dana Hull, who covers Tesla. So, Dana, the numbers weren't bad.
Yeah, no, they were good.
What are the most significant headlines here?
I think the significance is that they delivered more cars than they produced in the last quarter, so they're finally getting rid of some of the inventory that was hanging around. Surprisingly, the stock is sort of muted today, which is interesting, and the big question is demand. Like, is there still a huge demand for these cars, or is it a multiplier effect as more of them hit the roads?
Well, and the stock did surge on the back of the news that Musk had officially settled with the SEC, so perhaps some of that was already baked in. Kathy, is demand plateauing? Is that what you're seeing in these numbers?
We're not seeing that at all. I mean, hats off to Tesla. 80,000 is great, but we're similarly seeing demand and investment from all the other automakers as well. I mean, we're, as you mentioned in the opening, we're the largest provider of EV infrastructure and public networks in the country, and we are building as fast as those as we possibly can.
So you're seeing momentum from Audi and Porsche. Talk to us about the competition that Tesla will face in coming quarters as other car makers step up.
Well, that's right. I mean, in the first quarter of this year, there were kind of a sum of about $100 billion of investment announced by the OEMs around the world. I mean, that includes the Europeans, the Japanese, and the American automakers. And those are real announcements with real investments that are coming. And since then, every week we seem to get more and more news. I mean, the Daimler promoted an EV person to run the company. You mentioned Audi has announced its e-tron a couple of weeks ago. The Chinese automakers are going great guns. I mean, again, we all saw the Saudis invested in Lucid. So to me, it seems that if you are not investing in manufacture and mainstreaming of electric vehicles and you're a car maker, then you're not going to be doing a lot of business in a short amount of time.
Dana, you had owners volunteering in stores, Tesla owners turning out in droves to help get these cars out. Talk to us about whether Tesla can sustain the efforts it put in this quarter to meet these numbers under intense pressure going forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's always another hill for Tesla to climb. I mean, they were able to get out these deliveries because, you know, people showed up in stores and were really helping. I'm sure everyone is exhausted, and then they're going to have to do it again in the fourth quarter. But this was really seen as a watershed moment, not just for the company, but for the mainstreaming of electric vehicles as a whole. And I think, you know, here in California, I see more and more Model 3s on the road all the time.
So, Kathy, of course, the infrastructure has to keep up. You know, what can be done to supercharge, if you will, the development of the infrastructure across the country to support what you believe is increasing demand?
Well, we're doing it. We're building not just in California. I mean, we're increasing our presence in California, where most of the EVs in the country are. By the end of this year, the uptick is on average 50% and 50% in both the Bay Area and the LA markets, to meet demand. We're similarly doing build-outs in Boston, in the state of Virginia, where we were awarded the Volkswagen Dieselgate money to as a penalty, but to help Virginia build out its infrastructure. We're seeing this across the country, and again, it's building out fast in places that are convenient for drivers. So again, some of our favorite places to go are retail outlets, which actually it's an amenity to have a charging infrastructure if you're going to go grocery shopping. So we're doing a lot of work there.
So, Dana, talk to us about what Tesla intends to do over the next quarter to keep this up. We know they're applying for another tent, but of course, this is at the same time they're dealing with these governance issues, finding 2 new independent directors. Musk will be stepping down as chair. They're, turning over $40 million worth of fines to the SEC. But what's going to be happening on the ground to make sure production doesn't stop? In fact, accelerates.
Right. Well, and remember, Tesla hasn't started selling the Model 3 overseas yet. Right now, they're only delivering in the United States and Canada. So eventually, they're going to open up sales in Europe. They're going to need to accelerate the building of this gigafactory in China because the tariffs are really hurting them, and they want to kind of accelerate getting local production in China so that the trade war doesn't negatively impact them. And they're going to continue to need to pump out the cars.
We are, in fact, seeing this acceleration of construction of the Shanghai factory, correct?
That's what they said in the release. What they said in the release today is that they really want to accelerate it because of the tariffs that imports on Tesla cars now face in China.
And, Kathy, talk to us about the implications of that for the broader EV market. Obviously, China is a huge market, yet now sort of steeped in controversy as a result of the trade war.
Well, look, the China is a huge market. The Chinese manufacturers are scaling up, and what's fascinating to me is all of the OEMs, the German car makers, the American car makers, are all establishing a presence there. The thing about the accelerating market is that I have not met somebody who drives an EV who would ever go back to not. We've got 3 concurrent factors that are really pushing this market. One is that the performance of the cars is fantastic. It is fun. It is really a great experience. The second, which is very important as well, is that it's now more cost effective in most places to drive an EV than an internal combustion engine car. And then finally, of course, the environmental drivers are incredibly important. So the policy environment is going to continue to push on EVs.
So, Dana, the big question, will the numbers we saw today be enough to drive the company to profitability?
Well, they didn't say anything about profitability in the release, which was interesting. So we have to wait for earnings, which is probably early November. And the big question for Tesla is always the ZEV credits. Can they sell, if they sell a lot of ZEV credits, that could put them over the top for profitability, too.
All right. Well, I know you're going to be following all of that with Tesla earnings coming up, what, in a month?
In about a month.
In about a month. You will be very busy. Dana Hull, a Bloomberg Tech, who covers Tesla for us, as well as Kathy Roy, EVgo CEO. Kathy, thank you so much as well. Coming up, California wants to bridge the gender gap in company leadership. How the board networking site The Board List could help it get there. That is next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. California companies are about to see women take charge. At least that's the hope. On Sunday, Governor Jerry Brown signed a Senate Bill 826 requiring California's public companies to have at least 1 female board member by the end of 2019. Women held precisely 0 seats on over 25% of the state's 445 publicly traded companies just last year. The push ramps up in 2021, requiring companies with 5 directors to have at least 2 female board members and boards of 6 or more to have 3, a threshold many Silicon Valley giants, including Facebook and Tesla, have yet to meet. The Board List, a networking site for female leaders, wants to help. Founded in 2015, the Board List connects nearly 3,000 endorsed women leaders with opportunities to serve on public and private company boards. Joining us now, CEO of the Board List, Shannon Gordon. So what does this mean?
It means we're about to see a change in the composition of boards in California. I mean, there's plenty of evidence overseas. Europe has had board quotas in place for over a decade now, and their numbers have moved from the low double digits all the way up to 43, 44% in some countries.
So let's talk about that, because we often get the question, do quotas work? Do quotas work?
The numbers move, yeah.
How significantly?
From say 11-12% up to whatever the quota is set at, and usually a couple percentage points over that threshold.
But then do those women who've been added to these boards actually have a voice? It's not just about sitting at the table, it's having a seat at the table.
That's right, and that's completely dependent on how the company approaches the conversation, how they incorporate these new members, the kinds of skills that they bring to the table. It is an inclusion issue after that.
So there are several big tech companies that don't measure up. I mean, Facebook, pretty surprising given Sheryl Sandberg's leadership, but Facebook only has 2 female board members, and they won't meet that threshold in coming years that this bill requires if they don't add more. Why is it so hard for these companies apparently to find women?
Well, one of the reasons the board list was founded is because our founder heard all the time, we'd love to add a woman to our board. We're not quite sure where to find one. I think part of the issue is that, many board searches are filled leveraging personal networks of either the board or the CEO, and those tend to be fairly homogenous networks. So one of the reasons we exist is because we're interested in expanding the lens, broadening those searches beyond first-order networks for boards.
The 2 female board members on the Facebook board are Sheryl Sandberg and Sue Desmond-Hellmann, who we're going to be speaking with a little bit later in the show. But as you look through, the company rosters, what are the companies you see that are concerning?
I think any company that is a publicly traded company in California, those that are private as well, that don't have any representation from women on their boards, it's concerning. I think it's a very difficult argument to make that the very best talent is represented in a room when 50% of the population isn't included.
So how is this impacting board lists? I mean, have you seen a lot of activity? Have you gotten a lot of inbound as a result?
Yes. We typically, coming out of the summer lull, we typically see about an increase of 30% in search volume going into September. This year we've seen 70% increase.
So what kinds of candidates are you offering, and are they being received well? Because obviously there are women out there, but oftentimes these companies say they're not good enough or they don't meet the standards for whatever reason.
Yeah, which is very surprising. We actually don't hear that very often when we put forward candidates from the board list. 80% of our platform is either a CEO, C-suite executive, or a board member. So these women are eminently qualified. The trick for us is really just finding the right set of competencies, the right experience to match what the searcher is looking for and that company's unique set of challenges.
So you've done a survey of the board list community about their feelings around quotas, and what did you find?
Overwhelmingly, the community supports it, which perhaps is not surprising. It's largely candidates that are looking for board seats. But we do, of course, include searchers in that survey who are men and women, as well as people who have endorsed women for board service. And overwhelmingly, the numbers came back in support of this bill. And that's not only Californians. Both the increase in search volume that we've seen and the respondents from the survey have come back to say they very much hope legislation like this passes in their state as well.
Gender isn't the only measure of diversity. I mean, should the government be mandating, other kinds of diversity like race, sexuality?
I mean, we'd love to see this all happen without legislation. So, what I continue to challenge our community to do on the board list is to think about this. Let's do one better. If you're going to put a woman on your board, let's make it, intersectional. There's no reason why candidates that get placed on boards from this legislation couldn't be African American, Latina. There's so many different wonderful candidates out there to choose from, and so many different perspectives that reflect both the employee base and the customer base of companies.
But realistically, is that going to happen without laws?
It's a good question. The gender parity issue hasn't. And that's one of the reasons that the legislation went into place. We were on pace for parity in 2055 before this legislation happened. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. We'll see.
All right, Shannon Gordon, CEO of the board list, thank you so much for stopping by. Good to have you. Now, speaking of a woman on the board of Facebook, we're going to hear from one of them when we return. As I said, Sue Desmond-Hellmann, the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, joins us next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's vision is a world where every person has the opportunity to live a healthy, productive life. Every year, the foundation spends billions of dollars around the globe tackling critical issues like child mortality, infectious disease, expanding health coverage, and access to education. They're also big believers in the power of data and technology to help solve some of the world's most pressing issues. We caught up with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation CEO Dr. Sue Desmond-Hellmann at GeekWire in Seattle. Take a listen.
In every way, data drives how we take action. Globally, we use data on the global burden of disease to decide which diseases to invest in. We invest in HIV, malaria, TB, pneumonia, diarrheal diseases, specifically because those are the top 5 killers of folks who live in low resource areas. So that's completely a data-driven decision. Increasingly in the U.S., we use data like the data of Raj Chetty to understand neighborhoods, census zones that are filled with opportunity, where people can have the American dream, and just as importantly, areas that are low opportunity. So that's driving some of the questions we're asking about economic mobility in the United States.
You lived in Uganda working on AIDS and cancer. You're trained as an oncologist. You have worked on gene therapy and precision medicine. Where do you see the biggest breakthroughs in the near term using those technologies?
Well, one of the most exciting areas was actually the subject of the Nobel Prize for Medicine or Physiology just yesterday, and that is tapping into the immune system to treat cancer. It's early days, but it literally is the kind of gee whiz science that I love. The science that was celebrated with the Nobel yesterday was all about the cancer sending a signal to turn off or turn down your own immune system. Really a dastardly thing. And the cool thing about that science was that once you know where that signal is targeted, you can take off the brakes. And so today's cancer treatment, the kind of cancer treatment that allowed Jimmy Carter to celebrate his 94th birthday yesterday, is all about taking off the brakes, and your own immune system allows you to self-treat your cancer. If I said that, you would say, come on, you know, that's science fiction. That's in the future. That's actually happening now and is a way that patients are treated today.
Now, if you solve all of these problems around the world, you eradicate cancer, you eradicate hunger, there's concerns about overpopulation. Bill Gates posted a video with his annual letter to demonstrate his point that this shouldn't be a concern. Why aren't you concerned about overpopulation as a result of your efforts?
Yeah, I actually think it's one of the things that is under-recognized. If life gets better for populations, if life gets better for women, they have fewer children. Prosperity means that people have options. Your children actually surviving beyond their first month of life, beyond their 2nd and 5th birthday, means that women choose to have fewer children. And so it's actually a myth that helping people live long, prosperous lives can drive overpopulation. Far the opposite. And in fact, we just had an event last week we called Goalkeepers 2018 that celebrated the prosperity and 1 billion people lifting themselves out of poverty since the year 2000 in those areas where women especially, but families have been lifted out of poverty and drive their own agenda. They have fewer children, not more.
Now, Melinda has been a huge advocate for birth control, which has been at odds with the views of the current administration. How do you balance doing your work as a foundation with the views of the U.S. government?
Well, it turns out that there's actually something that virtually anybody you talk to, conservative, a liberal, somebody, no matter what their religion, can agree on. And that is women should be able to decide how old she is when she has her first child, how many children she wants to have, and how she spaces her children. All those things should be in a woman's hands. And no matter what your beliefs are, allowing women to drive her agenda on when she has children, how many she has, and how far apart they're born, which improves their ability to be healthy, all of those things are why we care about family planning. And we want women to be able to make that choice, to make modern, safe birth control available for women all around the world.
You obviously have your own extensive experience, and you're working with two smart and opinionated people in Bill and Melinda. How do you balance your ideas with theirs?
I love working with Bill and Melinda. I think, like so many opportunities I've had in my career, when you work with people who are smart and passionate, you can disagree. You can have really wonderful debates and dialogue about where to invest, how much to invest, what to push, what your priorities should be. We actually very uncommonly disagree, partly because we have very, very similar values, and in part because they're so clear about the North Star for our foundation. All lives have equal value. So everything we do all across the world has one thing in common, and that is our agenda is equity. And sharing that and sharing values means that most of the time we agree.
Now, you're also on the board of Facebook, and look, I have to ask, on the heels of Cambridge Analytica, on the heels of the biggest hack in Facebook's history, the founders of WhatsApp and Instagram leaving, the public trust in Facebook has eroded substantially. What's your best argument for why Mark Zuckerberg should maintain majority control and chairmanship at this point?
Well, as a director of Facebook and as the lead director of Facebook, I would tell you that having worked with Mark and known Mark before I joined the board, I am so impressed with how he's grown and developed as chairman and CEO. Something that I'm sure you covered, the switch from desktop to mobile, required an enormous drive and leadership and a huge change for Facebook. Facebook right now has a number of challenges, and I have a lot of confidence that Mark, as chairman and CEO, is going to drive Facebook in the right direction. He's spoken a lot about this publicly. I would endorse everything he's written and his testimony because I have confidence in him and Sheryl and the leadership team to drive Facebook to be what I also want Facebook to be, a good company that people trust and feel good about.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation CEO Sue Desmond-Hellmann, thanks so much for joining us today. Up next, Jeff Bezos blinked. Amazon caves to critics and raises the minimum wage for workers in the U.S. and the UK. How will this impact the company's bottom line? And could we see other competitors take notice? This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Amidst criticism and political pressure, Amazon is increasing the minimum wage for all employees in the U.S. and the U.K. From November 1st, in the United States, the company will pay $15 an hour at minimum. London employees will get a minimum £10.50 an hour, with the rest of the U.K. raised to £9.50. Amazon says this will apply to all its workers, including employees at Whole Foods and other subsidiaries. The company's Senior Vice President of Operations, Dave Clark, explained the move to Bloomberg Markets earlier today.
We've had a great year hiring, a great year of retention, in fact. But as we look forward to, as we really said, what do we want to be as an employer? What do we want our focus on pay to be? We decided this was a place we could lead. That's why we went ahead and moved now to the $15 in the U.S. starting November 1st. And while we're also moving to the £9.50 across the U.K. and £10.50 in London, effective November 1st as well.
Dave, just a note out from Bernie Sanders over the last couple of minutes. I want to congratulate Bezos for doing the right thing. Is this Amazon reacting to political pressure?
No, this is really us. We did look at what people had to say. We looked at our critics. We really stepped back and said, what do we want our focus to be? How do we want our view on pay to be going forward? We thought long and hard about it. And we landed on a place that said, this is an area we can take a leadership position in. And that's why we went ahead and did it. And we really feel really comfortable about where we're headed, both in the U.S. and in the UK.
Now, you had previously said that including stock and incentive bonuses for many, if not most workers, their hourly pay would have been above that anyway. What does this do to Amazon's bottom line? How much more are you spending now on wages given this so-called bump, Dave?
Right. We have previously discussed our average pay being over $15 an hour when you include all the stock and incentive pay. What we're talking about today is a new minimum pay, minimum cash pay, which will be effective across the U.S. and across the U.K. We'll talk more about what it means to the overall company bottom line in our earnings call later in the month. But what I can tell you is we're very excited about what this means for the company, what it can mean for customers over the long term. And today is a very exciting day for our employees as they receive this news coming up to the holiday season.
What about investors, Dave? Should they be concerned? Will it crimp profit margins?
Our focus on both price and selection are unchanged by this. We expect to continue with great prices, great selection, great service for customers in the months to come.
Dave, you've also indicated today that you are going to lobby for a more broad increase in wages, the minimum wage. Where do you think that number should be? And sort of how significant an impact do you think what you've done today will have on that process?
Well, what we know is we believe that $7.25 as a federal minimum wage in the U.S. is too low. We'll leave it to Congress and the experts to decide what that number should be. For us in the U.S., that number is $15. We think that's a good place to be, and we encourage other large employers to join us there.
Okay, so currently I think Target pays. Let me just check my numbers here. I think you've got Target paying 11. I could have this the wrong way around, and some of the other competitors paying 12 as well. So there's Walmart pays 11, Target pays 12. Those numbers are too low, is what you're saying?
Well, what we're saying is we think the $7.25 federal minimum is too low. We encourage other big employers like the ones you mentioned to start the journey and join us at the $15 level. Would be great.
Dave, what's the next plan? So you're going to raise in the UK to $9.50 and potentially $10.50 in some areas. How long will this be the minimum wage for Amazon? At what point do you anticipate needing to increase even further in order to attract talent?
It's a great question. We look at our wages and overall compensation structure in every part of the world every year. And so we'll come back and look at it again in 2019 to determine if there's anything else needed at the time. And we'll do it every year going forward as we have in the past.
Amazon Senior Vice President of Operations Dave Clark speaking there with Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn and Guy Johnson. Now, one of the critics calling for an increase to the minimum wage has been Senator Bernie Sanders, who took to Twitter shortly after this announcement, tweeting, "I want to congratulate Jeff Bezos for doing exactly the right thing by raising the minimum wage at Amazon and Whole Foods to $15 an hour. Let me thank the hundreds of Amazon workers who contacted my office and the Fight for $15 movement, which has been leading this effort. What Mr. Bezos has done today is not only enormously important for Amazon's hundreds of thousands of employees, it could well be a shot heard around the world. I urge corporate leaders around the country to follow his lead." Let's talk about this more with our Bloomberg Tech senior executive editor, Brad Stone, who wrote the book on Amazon, of course, and our Bloomberg opinion columnist, Shira Ovide in New York. Brad, I want to start with you because there's a lot of context leading up to this, and Amazon has been under fire for the better part of a decade about how much it pays its workers and the conditions in the warehouses. So, put this into context for us.
Right. Well, it's been under fire for a decade, but really it intensified this year. In April, you had surveys showing that 1 in 3 Amazon employees in the warehouses were on public assistance or food stamps, 1 in 10 in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. Bernie Sanders kind of embraced this cause. In August, he introduced a bill, they called it the Bezos bill, that would tax employees 100% of the value of public assistance to their employees. And look, I mean, you heard Dave Clark say this wasn't a political reaction. I think Amazon, to its credit, does listen to critics. We've seen it on the kind of white-collar culture stuff, on the sales tax issue a decade ago. I think Amazon has decided, particularly with Jeff Bezos being the wealthiest guy in the world and the announcement of HQ2 coming up, that this is not an area where they can afford to keep getting hammered.
Shira, what's your take here? You're often skeptical about some of Amazon's efforts. Is that the same with this one?
No, I mean, look, give them credit, as Brad said, for responding to criticism. And I was just struck by the rhetorical change at Amazon in a month. So a month ago, Dave Clark, the executive who runs Amazon's warehouses, who we just heard from, he and Amazon writ large put out this very defensive blog post basically defending Amazon from the criticisms of Senator Sanders and others, sort of making fun of Senator Sanders referring to food stamps, the federal assistance program, as food stamps, saying that was an antiquated term, encouraged Amazon warehouse workers to reach out to Senator Sanders and tell them their truth, I think is the words that Dave Clark used. So a month later, you have Dave Clark and others at Amazon standing standing up and saying, we listen to the criticism and we believe $15 an hour is a fair base wage for Amazon workers. And wow, that's quite a turnaround from the defensive tone the company had a month ago.
So, Brad, what should we take away from that? And, Bezos, who doesn't always cave to public pressure because there is a lot of it, doing so this time?
Well, when we see these kind of tactical retreats from Amazon, they're usually also good business. And I would say this is good business. It's a very tight labor market. Amazon is going to be hiring more than 120,000 temporary workers, more and more every year because the company is growing by leaps and bounds. It's competing for those workers. Jeff being now the wealthiest person in the world, there's really a discontinuity between that fact and the fact that, his workers have trouble earning a living wage. So I think it's good business. It's certainly good PR heading into the buying season. And look, Amazon can afford it.
Analysts saying this will add about $1 billion to $2 billion in incremental costs to the bottom line. Shira, Target and Walmart, meantime, pay their workers $11. Does this mean Amazon can really better compete?
I think that's Amazon's bet, as Brad said, right, that you have to look at the labor market conditions in the United States, which is the conditions are tight. And so if Amazon can do this, get good PR heading into the holiday season, as Brad said, and steal some good job applicants from places like Target and Walmart, then that's certainly good for Amazon's bottom line. And we should point out that if that $1 billion to $2 billion figure is correct, Amazon's annual operating costs, excluding the cost to buy products, is something like $60+ billion a year. So $1 billion or $2 billion is not a huge dent.
We were looking at a chart, Brad, there earlier, comparing the median incomes at Facebook and Google to Amazon, and they're really two different kinds of companies. You've got, entirely white-collar corporate workers working at Google and Facebook, and Amazon is a combination of both. How does Amazon balance its two identities going forward?
Well, I mean, it's just the reality of being in e-commerce. It's a company that tries to bill itself as a technology company and an engineering company, but the reality, which they can no longer hide, is that a majority of the employees there are working in the warehouses.
So, Shira, do you think there's anything political going on here? This in the midst of President Trump directly attacking Amazon, sort of not being happy about Jeff Bezos' leadership of the Washington Post, the possibility of Amazon HQ2 being in Washington, D.C., Jeff Bezos having just paid a visit there. Are there any political undertones here?
There's no way a decision like this happens without the politics, right? Amazon operates in the real world, not in a political vacuum. And the fact is that Amazon has faced political criticism both from the left side of the political spectrum, from people like Senator Bernie Sanders, and from the right for various other issues, right? For kind of evading taxes, as the president has accused Amazon of doing, of crushing small-town retailers. And, the left and the right sides of the political spectrum, I don't think Amazon can ignore the shouts from both sides.
Can they not?
No, absolutely not, and particularly if they are going to Washington with HQ2. But really, let's also put it in the context of the antitrust conversation that is now occurring around Amazon's power, the market strength of Google and Facebook. Clearly, Amazon wants to reduce its own vulnerabilities as these discussions will get louder.
All right, Brad Stone, Shira Overday, Bloomberg Tech. Thank you both, as always. Meantime, Amazon will also be increasing the amount of European content on its streaming services. New European Union rules agreed to on Tuesday stipulate video-on-demand services like Amazon and Netflix will have to ensure at least 30% of their catalogs are made up of European content. The legislation could also require online platforms to help finance Europe-made films and television, and still needs to be rubber-stamped by EU member states. Netflix is doubling its European programming budget to $1 billion this year, and Amazon will soon have at least a dozen original series from Europe. Coming up, Amazon wants to make your home a smart, connected environment. One of the key lines of devices in that goal is Ring's doorbells, cameras, and more. We're going to speak to Ring CEO Jamie Siminoff next. This is Bloomberg. Let's head now to the GeekWire Summit in Seattle, where the CEO of Ring, Jamie Siminoff, is standing by. Of course, Amazon bought Ring for $1 billion earlier this year, and it's a big part of Amazon's push into the home. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. So talk to us about how the integration is going so far. What have you been able to accomplish that you wouldn't have been able to accomplish without Amazon?
So, I mean, before Amazon, we were doing great, but, you know, raising a lot of money, working really hard on both sides, building product, but also running the business. And now with Amazon, I have this great foundation that I'm able to build off of and just really now focus on my customers, which we call neighbors, and our products, and just making them better and getting them out there to make neighborhoods safer.
So Amazon just rolled out 70 new voice Alexa activated devices. How is Ring part of this Amazon Everywhere push?
So, yeah, it's only been about 5 months since we've done the acquisition and close, and so we're really starting to get there. One of the things of the 70 that we announced was Alexa Guard, which Ring is integrated to, so now you can arm and disarm your Ring alarm system from Alexa.
So, of these new Alexa voice-activated features that tie into Ring, which ones have been most popular for users?
So for the Alexa stuff, you know, it's an area I'm still learning which features are the most popular. You know, for me, it's the reminders. I actually just reminded my wife the other day that I love her when I was traveling. I had Alexa reminder in the morning, so that's probably my favorite one. It got me the most points.
All right, well, you have my support now after that. Any new features in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
You know, for Ring, it's really about a mission to reduce crime in neighborhoods. We're going to stay inside of Amazon building products and services, effective and affordable security products and services that, you know, make our neighbors' lives better. One of the products that we launched that's doing really well, that gets a little bit less attention just because it's not a physical product, is our Neighbors app, which anyone can download for free, see what's going on in their neighborhood, and be part of making their neighborhood safer.
Walk us through your reason for selling versus staying independent and competing with Amazon at the stage you were in when you made this big decision to sell.
The decision was really around finding a partner that believed. I'm a very mission-focused company, and so finding a partner that believed in what we were doing and wanted to support that. I wasn't the entrepreneur that had this idea that I was going to exit or IPO, or I really didn't have a definition for where I wanted the company, other than I wanted to make sure we were able to still impact people in the way we wanted to do that. And when, you know, the Amazon team came and really believed in that mission and spent time with us, that's when I felt it was the right place to put myself and the business to support best our neighbors.
Now, I should probably disclose that I'm a Ring customer, and there are many features that I love, and I will certainly use the feature now that you mentioned to remind my husband that I love him. But there is a feature that is very frustrating, and that is battery life. When I change the battery, it lasts only a few weeks. Then I don't know the battery has died. I miss people coming to my door. I miss packages. What are you doing about that?
We're doing a number of things around battery life. One is a lot of solar, so we're adding a lot of solar accessories to our products. We're also going to be coming out with some other sort of technology ways of which will update into the current products you have to extend those battery lives. Hopefully we'll be able to announce that over the next few months. And a lot of that technology comes from the integration that we've been able to do with Amazon, you know, now being able to leverage a much bigger pool of technology and experts that we just couldn't as a small independent company.
What do you have to say to the customers who maybe don't want Amazon everywhere or are concerned about having Amazon everywhere when it comes to privacy, when it comes to the risk that your smart doorbell could be hacked?
You know, I think that Amazon has done a wonderful job of securing and protecting the privacy around their customers. I think we've done and focused really around that for our neighbors. And, you know, I do believe we are one of the, you know, the best solutions for security in the neighborhood. And I think we'll just let customers continue to choose that.
What do you think you have on the competition from other smart doorbell products? There's Nest, there's Blink, there's August. There seems to have been an explosion in your area, you know, in just the last couple of years.
So, yeah, I mean, from a competition side, we've had literally hundreds of people come into the market. why we've been able to keep such a large market share, I believe, is because we really are there to deliver effective and affordable solutions to our customers. We're not about just trying to sell a product, we're about trying to sell something with effectiveness, and we've really been able to prove that in our study we just did with the New York police, where we were able to reduce burglaries by 50%. So it's really about that effectiveness of our solution, not just about the particular hardware products.
Now, famously, Shark Tank turned you down, but you've clearly had the last laugh, and you're going back as a guest judge. What do you have to say to the judges who turned you down, and how do you make sure you and they don't miss the next ring?
You know, I think as an investor, now that I've been able to go to the other side of the tank, I'm sure I'll miss the next big ring, because investors, it's very tough to pick who's the best, who's not. I really have no animosity for any of the sharks. I think that platform is what really helped build Ring into what it is today. So I'm thankful we just had the opportunity to be on it. I do wish that we had gotten money at the time. I was broke at the time, so it would have been very nice to have had that money. But we still made it. And what I tell any entrepreneur who doesn't get, you know, the money on either Shark Tank or from another investor is, we were turned down over 100 times. You just got to keep going.
All right, well, I'm sure you'll be getting some sheepish looks there as you return. Jamie Siminoff, CEO of Ring, thanks so much for stopping by. Up next, Twitter intensifies its hunt for fake profiles ahead of the U.S. midterm elections. The details coming up. This is Bloomberg. Twitter is ramping up its fight against fake profiles before next month's elections in the United States. The company says it's flagged 9.4 million accounts per week. Twitter has removed about 50 accounts that misrepresented themselves as members of state Republican parties. It's also targeting tweets that share news with misleading or incorrect party affiliation information. Meantime, Facebook announced a new anti-bullying feature that allows users to block certain offensive or unwanted comments from their posts by selecting keywords they don't want to see. The tool comes long after similar efforts by other social media platforms. Facebook-owned Instagram and Twitter both introduced keyword blocking features in 2016. Social media and tech companies are set to meet President Trump at the White House later this month. Google CEO Sundar Pichai is set to be joining the summit, and the administration says it hopes Facebook and Twitter will also be represented. Prominent Republicans, including the president, have accused social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and tech companies like Google of silencing conservative voices and news sources. Alphabet, Google's parent, denies it makes content decisions based on politics.
He committed to come back to the White House. We're going to have a little conference. The president will preside over it. We will have the big internet companies, big social media companies, search companies, and some who are dissatisfied with those companies. And I don't know if we've set a date yet, but I reckon it's going to be around the middle of October.
And let's wrap the show as we began it on Tesla. While many traditional luxury car makers are unveiling their rival electric cars, Renault CEO Carlos Ghosn says he doesn't feel threatened by the California car maker.
We're not competing against Tesla because Tesla main offer is on the premium market, electric premium, where most of our offer is on the middle market in terms of electric cars. And now with the entry level market. So we're really not very competitive. In fact, in a certain way, we are allied into the promotion of the mass marketed, affordable electric cars.
That was Renault CEO Carlos Ghosn speaking with Bloomberg at the Paris Motor Show. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow on the show, we will be back at the GeekWire Summit in Seattle, where we'll be speaking with Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg. Do not miss that conversation. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.